Sorry these reviews have been a little bit late, like almost a week late. I had a lot of stuff going on between my trip from last week in New York City till now, taking care of these guys, dogs, and I had a bit of a car problem simply because that tornado that came through the Hudson Valley, it actually went around us, but I think the winds from it or whatever destroyed a tree limb, and unfortunately it smashed onto my car windshield, so I have to get that taken care of, and it's getting fixed on Tuesday. So that's what's been going on, but let's get this review started. So on May 12th, I saw Angels in America at the Neil Simon Theater. I saw all 8 hours in one day. Pretty crazy, but it's doable. I know some people say, oh, don't do all 8 hours, you'll be exhausted. But I think it just depends really on the person. If you're one of those that can only do part one on one of the days and then part two on another day, that's fine. I did it all 8 hours. I didn't feel exhausted. As a matter of fact, even though it is 8 hours, I mean, it's one part is I think 3.5, and the second is 4, and they both have 2 intermissions. It actually went by quick. I will say for Angels in America, the 8 hours go by pretty quickly, and it's just amazing. I know there's been a lot of reviews prior to mine going over it, so I don't want to be an overkill. I'll just give like a basic overview of part 1 and part 2, and then I'll just talk about what I really loved about this play. So part 1 is basically you're introduced to the main characters, Prior Walter, who's played by Andrew Garfield, and Roy Cohn, who's played by Nathan Lane, and each of them discover they have AIDS. This takes place during the 1980s, during the AIDS epidemic, and each of them deal with it in their own way. Now, Prior kind of jokes about it. He tells his boyfriend Lewis, who's played by James McArdle, that he has the lesions, and that's like one of the first signs that you have HIV or AIDS. And he kind of jokes about it, and Lewis is like, that's not funny, and eventually he eventually has to go to the hospital, and then when that happens, Lewis basically leaves him. Basically his complaint was, why did my boyfriend leave me at my most lowest? Everyone else's boyfriends or their significant others sticks by them. Meanwhile, Roy Cohn is in total denial that he has AIDS. I mean, he argues with his doctor, Dr. Henry. He's telling him, no, it's liver failure. And even when you look at the Wikipedia about Roy Cohn, he denied it up until his dying day that it was liver failure. So then you meet the other characters. You meet Joe Pitt, who's played by Lee Pace, and you have his wife, Harper, who is played by Denise Gough, and they have their quirks. Like, Joe is a Mormon, and he's a Republican, and he's in denial. Some of this play is about being in denial about who you truly are, and he's in denial about being a homosexual, like being gay. And he goes throughout these things, and his wife is in denial about him being gay. She kind of figures it out a while, prior to, when this play is happening, 1985. Because she's so lonely and stuff, she takes, her drug of choice is Valium, so she takes, like, a lot of Valium, and she goes on these, like, trips, like, kind of reminds me of, like, acid trips a little bit. So she goes on there, and they go through their arguments, and Joe is also Roy's kind of, like, lover. I mean, it's kind of, like, in the air, but it's insinuated that he's his lover. So he has to go through all of that. And then, the play also starts off with the rabbi, who's also played by Susan Brown, when Lewis's grandma dies, and she's all alone. So there's, like, this theme in the first part about loneliness and denial. So nobody attends this grandma's funeral, not even Lewis. Lewis tends to run when things get bad. He doesn't like death, obviously. He doesn't like when things are just really murky. He also, with Lewis, too, he tends to know everything. And there's this, like, great scene with him and Belize, who's played by Nathan Stewart Jarrett. And he goes through this like entire rant about how life is, and Belize is like the voice of reason. He's the voice of reason character because Belize is also a nurse, so he knows what's going on. And also he's a former drag queen, and he's also best friends with Pryor. So Pryor's going throughout his thing, and so is Roy, and he's also Roy Cohn's nurse. So there's a connection between all these characters through Belize. And part one basically ends with the angel coming down from the heavens telling Pryor that he is a prophet, and Pryor is like, it ends on that cliffhanger. So part two opens up with, Pryor and the angel, and how part one is basically real life. Part two it's kind of like an alternative universe for these guys' life. Like for Roy Cohn, he's haunted by Ethel Rosenberg, who's also played by Susan Brown. This lady plays so many characters. I think she's a manifestation of his guilt because he was the reason why she was sentenced to execution along with her husband, Julius, because she was a spy of the United States, charged with espionage and stuff, so she was sentenced to death. And she dies, and I think she's just a manifestation of his guilt. And Pryor is still dealing with this angel telling him he's a prophet and he needs to, tell the world. And basically, I think the main theme for that one was like, don't do anything, but he's like, I gotta do something. I gotta live life. I can't just sit here, That was towards, the end. I'm just truncating everything. The play is really, really, really complicated, but it's easy to follow. Joe and his wife Harper eventually break up, or they get separated. So Joe, he goes out with Lewis, who's now the ex-boyfriend of Pryor, and he's like, he's still exploring his homosexuality, and so he's dealing with him. And Harper's still going on these trips, and during one of her drug Valium trips, she meets Pryor, and he's dressed in drag, from his former job or life that he did. A lot of craziness goes on with part two, just mostly dealing with the angels and stuff, and telling Pryor. And oh yeah, Roy Cohn eventually dies. I mean, that's not really a spoiler if you follow like American history and American politics. He dies in 1986, so that's when he dies in part two, during that same time. And also, because Belize was Roy's nurse, Roy, because he could, he's connected to so many people, he got this drug called ZTE, or something like that, where it's supposed to stall the AIDS virus, so you don't get, you don't die right away, but, he kind of does. But when he dies, Belize comes in with Pryor, with a backpack, and they take almost all the drugs that were in the refrigerator so that they could help more people who have AIDS that were more deserving. So that, that's what was going on there. Eventually, towards the end of part two and the end of the play, Pryor goes into the heavens because for some reason Harper can go into this too. I don't know how, just how she can do things. And they're telling him, oh, you're the prophet, and he makes a realization in the heavens, because he's kind of on that edge of death and life, that he wants to live despite having the AIDS diagnosis and everything. He wants to live. He wants to enjoy life. And eventually, at the end of the play, it's like 5 years later, Pryor is still alive because with the help of his friends and the drug, he's able to live his life, and he's able to help other people. He's able to help with the AIDS epidemic that's going on. And so it ends with, basically, I think the theme was eventually taking responsibility and helping other people out. And if you don't help them out, you're just dragged into wherever you go. So that's basically this story, just like really truncated. It's a lot more complicated than that, but just as like a simple thing. There's a lot of things that I really loved about this play. It dealt with death, it dealt with the AIDS crisis, it dealt with the, LGBT community, it dealt with the various types of people in the LGBT community. And how some people, there's people like Pryor who is proud to be gay and he's not afraid to be gay, unlike Roy, who's just totally in denial, and so is Joe up until a certain point. And then he realizes, and eventually Harper after they go through their argument of, are you gay, and the mother too. I really like the characters. There was no weak characters in this play. Everyone was strong. Nathan Lane definitely has his Tony in the bag. He was just awesome as Roy Cohn. I mean, he played him as such an asshole. I mean, that's who Roy Cohn was. He was just all about himself, selfish, an asshole, didn't give a shit about anybody but himself. Andrew has a really good shot at the Tony. He gave another strong performance. He was really good. Susan Brown, oh my God, she played so many characters. She played Joe Pitt's mom. She played at the rabbi at the beginning. She also played the last Bolshevik, Alexei. I'm not going to pronounce the rest of the name. It's so long. And I like that how it always began with her playing these characters that lead into these stories. Susan Brown was also nominated for a Tony. I mean, deservedly so. She was playing like at least 6 or 7 different characters. Just crazy what she could do. I mean, she was pulling all voices. She was playing both men and women, so that was awesome to see. Denise Gough was awesome as Harper. Really loved her. Amanda Lawrence, she was really great as the angel. She also played like one of the nurses, and she played one of the Mormon mothers, that's, talking with the Joe Pitt's mom, I think buying a house or something, or just talking about life, something like that. Sorry about that. And then you had Lee Pace as Joe, like this Republican Mormon, like, oh, I'm one of the straight guys, but really not. Especially when that scene where he totally breaks down spoiler, he totally gets naked in this, like when he's arguing with Lewis, like he's like, I want to be with you, you need to see the real me, and he just takes off all his clothes because they were discussing the Mormon underwear. I forget the term, but they were discussing that. So he like, no, I want you to see all of me. I'm serious about this. And then James McArdle as Lewis, he was fantastic. Especially this guy, like James in real life comes from Scotland. Like he comes from Glasgow. He pulled off being a Jewish gay man from New York like flawlessly. I don't know how he did the voice. I don't know how he went, from his normal Scottish voice, in real life to that. Like that's like a lot of technical work. Just amazing. And speaking of technical work, just how they did the set, I thought it was great. You have all these different neon lights and all these buildings that represented, the funeral home to the hospital rooms to the Pitt's home to the, streets of New York. And then there's a couple of sets that come up, like Roy Cohn's hospital room. And then there's like this really neat thing that they did where Pryor's hospital room is behind Roy Cohn's, and Roy Cohn's window kind of peers into Pryor's. So there was that nice introspective into both their lives at the same time, and I really liked the focus that went into that. I think one of my favorite parts of the play was when Pryor is visited by all these other Pryors, like Pryor Walters, from, the 1500s, the 1600s, 1700s. Two of the Pryors were played by Lee Pace and Nathan Lane. So Nathan Lane was like the campy 1700s Pryor Walter, and Lee Pace was, I believe, from the 1400s Pryor Walter, and they were discussing all the different diseases that were afflicting their time. So for the 1400s Pryor Walter, it was the Black Plague, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, it might have been like syphilis or something for the 1700s. I'm not too sure, but I do know it was the Black Plague for the 1400s or whatever year, the medieval Pryor Walter. I really enjoyed that, how he was meeting up with these and having conversations with all these different Pryors. It was cool to see. And oh yeah, prior to Angels coming to Neil Simon, there was, of course, Cats, the musical that was there. And in one part of the play, Roy Cohn was on the phone with a bunch of different people that were coming to New York City, and they were looking for something to do, like seeing a Broadway musical. And he eventually gets somebody to get a bunch of, I think it was like 7 or 8 tickets to go see Cats. And he's like, Cats? Musical about cats? And I just found it so funny because they're in the same theater house that Cats was previously in. So I don't know if that was coincidental or part of the play from before, or just like a joke or something. I don't know, but I just found it funny. I can definitely see this play winning a lot of awards, especially revival and stuff, and best actor, and possibly, best supporting actor and supporting actresses and stuff. Just really, really excellent. I would definitely see this play. It's still going on till, I believe, July. I would definitely see this play just for what it is. It is called, a gay Fantasia. It's about LGBT, and it's about, AIDS topics and politics and American life and everything in between. Definitely for the actors, especially Nathan Lane and Andrew Garfield and Lee Pace and Susan Brown and Denise, like everybody, I'm telling you, just for all the strong performances. And also the puppetry. Well, I don't know if you would call it puppetry, but they have to move the wings for the angel, but you really don't notice the people who are operating the wings because they're in dark clothes. They kind of reminded me of the little dark shadows from Kingdom Hearts. But how they moved her around, the angel, it was amazing. Like that was awesome choreography work right there. I don't know if that was nominated for that, but it was still awesome to see. And like the wing movements were totally believable. How she like flew in the air and how she came down, because she was in the air a couple times and like scaring the crap out of Pryor. Oh, Amanda was just so amazing. I wouldn't see it just for, there is that full nude scene with Lee Pace as Joe. I know some people don't like nudity or whatever, so whatever, no judgments. And also there's one scene where Roy pulls out his IV and all this blood comes out. There's like a couple blood scenes, and that's one of them. Like the audience gasps, like. I've seen that happen in real life, but kind of in reverse, because I used to be a medic. If you put the needle in wrong into the vein, it will spill out like that. So it is possible for that to happen. I read somewhere that that doesn't happen. I'm like, no, that does happen, but if you do it wrong. But anyway, and the other scene is when Pryor is going through one of his AIDS attacks, and he's like dying on the floor. And he, not to put it lightly, he shits blood. And so you see this huge blood stain around his butt. If you're afraid of blood, this isn't for you. And if LGBT things aren't your thing, then yeah, this won't be for you. But honestly, I would definitely see this. Honestly, deserves at least a 90 out of 100. It was so good. The time flew by. You didn't even realize 8 hours passed by, honestly, and that's being truthful. Definitely go see it at the Neil Simon Theater. As for the stage door reports, I did get some signatures I got from Amanda and Denise Goff. One of these is Lee's, and one of these is Andrew's. They did come out. I'm surprised anybody came out for the stage door, just because it's so long and it's so emotionally draining, especially for these actors. They have to really, really act their asses off on stage and give it their all. We did, like, everybody did see Nathan Lane, but he went from the stage door to his car, like, just right away. So he didn't sign, but it's totally understandable. I mean, he's playing like just an out there character for Roy. So totally, I'm surprised Andrew comes out there, just because he screams, he cries, he has to go all over the floor, he has to be carried by people. I mean, he's just like all over the stage, and he's putting his all out there. I mean, when he does go out there, he's tired, but understandably. I'll show a couple pictures of of all the people I saw. They didn't take any selfies, just because There's so many people, just to warn if that's your thing. Just because there's a lot of people outside the stage door, and it is an 8-hour play, or on the separate days, it's 4 hours each time. They need their rest. And just for them to sign and to talk to people, that's awesome. I will say that the crowd for the most part for this is pretty chill. I did have like a kid that is that was like around 13. I don't know if he knows like etiquette or not. I think he was just so excited, but because I'm so short and he was tall for like a 13-year-old, he was kind of pushing me into other people, which that's not cool. Just like as a heads up, if you're taller than somebody, because I can't see anybody, like really, if people are in front of me, I can't see. I just can only do like over the shoulder. But he was like kind of pushing and leaning just to see. But they're coming down anyway. There's no need to do that. I'm not claustrophobic, but there's some people that are. So just to warn, don't do that because you might freak somebody out. Especially if there's somebody there that's afraid of crowds. Just as a heads up. But just a totally great time. Definitely would see this one again. Please, please, please go see this before it ends in July. It's just so excellent. I really hope it wins a lot of awards for the Tonys. It's well deserving. I will be putting out a couple more reviews probably today or tomorrow because I'm doing them in succession just because I'm trying to catch up. And the next 2 reviews will be for Carousel and Me and My Girl. And that's it. Bye.